Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and Scott Morrison signing off on an in-principle agreement for a free trade deal between the two countries to be completed by the end of the year. It's the first post-Brexit trade deal that Britain has entered into, and Boris Johnson spoke about the benefit to his country and to Australia.
And the broad outlines of the deal, as you can imagine, is that you give us Tim Tams, we give you penguins, you give us Vegemite, we give you Marmite.
Movement of people, movement of goods, movement of services. This is what underpins the strength of advanced economies and liberal democracies.
Scott Morrison has described it as the biggest development in trade relations between the two countries since the 1970s, when Britain entered the common market. And Boris Johnson spoke about the suicide of farmers that occurred when that development happened.
I have to tell you that was pretty devastating for a lot of farmers in Australia. They committed suicide, some of them, in the face of what happened to Australian agriculture.
I asked Boris Johnson about his stance on China and the difficulties Australia have making the same stance when 40% of our exports go to China. He said he stood with Australia when it came to economic coercion, and he did not want to start a new Cold War. Can you see the difficulties Australia has with dealing with this?
I think people are worried about what's happening to the Uyghurs. They're worried about some of the ways China behaves in its region, and actually behaves particularly towards Australia. So we stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends. But I think I probably speak for Scott as well when I say nobody wants to descend into a new Cold War.
Mr Johnson, who is known to favour a tougher stance on tackling climate change than Australia, said where Scott Morrison was at was a good place in terms of pushing towards net zero emissions by 2050.
Scott has declared for net zero by 2050,
Preferably.
Which is a great step forward when you consider the situation Australia is in. It's a massive coal producer, and I'm impressed by the ambition of Australia. Obviously, we're going to be looking for more the whole time as we go into COP26 in November.
Mr Morrison now travels to Windsor Castle to meet the Queen and to France to meet President Emmanuel Macron before heading back to Australia to 2 weeks quarantine.